You forgot to ask where Isha and Void are kept, along with those rifts of yours. Don't tell me you don't want all those things back. The system panel blinked before Ryuk, who lay upon a rock in the garden, a leaf stalk in the corner of his mouth. Isha and Void, obviously, but they wouldn't have kept them in a bad place, or imprisoned them or anything. Most likely, they found some place in the EAR, where there are more of them or at least others familiar with both of them. Zafri's connection with me might have been severed, but she's with her family in the Crocanoid Kingdom. There's nothing for me to worry about. As for the rifts, they can keep them, he said with an unbothered shrug. And why is that? You went through hell to get those things. Maybe, but they've served their purpose. I no longer cultivate the Void Azura Grimoire, so having the Void Azura Rift was just a burden. The Technoforge Ruin is great, but the Technoforge Army's strength is obsolete. I could not use them in the battle against the Nulls as they'll face destruction. I could try to upgrade them, but who knows what that requires, and even then, they might still not be up to mark. Their strength no longer serves me, so it's not worth haggling with the lords for. The only thing I miss is perhaps the Garden of Mechirasa, which I'm definitely going to take back. But since Isha and Void aren't with me per se, I don't really need it, do I? They can help me hold it for now, he explained with another lazy shrug, and the system was speechless. What's wrong with you? Feeling like jumping off a bridge? It asked as Ryuk rolled his eyes. I wish. But you know, these things attach themselves to a part of my soul, and they obtain a part of my soul. Keeping bonds with Isha, and the rest, the rifts, all of this is a fusion of souls, taking a part of me while I take a part of them. But now that the connection has been severed, I get to keep my soul in its originality without carrying other souls with me. So you feel more free? It summarized, and he nodded. Yes, something like that, and I'm not in a rush to give that up. His brow furrowed in the next moment when he watched a streak of starlight flash through the purple sky, rapidly fading. Been a long time since I last saw a shooting star, Ryuk muttered before his gaze turned to the panel blinking before him. You still remember your promise to Odette, right? That I'll be returning in 3 years? He asked. You did remember. Of course I did. And time here in the upper realm moves faster compared to the lower realm, remember? How many years have I spent here? Less than 1. In the lower realm, it'll be around 1/4. So maybe what, just 3 to 4 months or so have passed now in Amamura? He asked with a shrug. Shouldn't be far from the exact number. Funny how time works, right? Ryuk mused quietly. It was all just weird, this timing concept. Ryuk himself back on Endearth, up until now, his total age should be around maybe less than 25 or so. Yet the Null Dragon War had happened half a century ago. So technically, to the upper realms, Ryuk was about 60+ years old, but in truth, he was still in his 20s. If you're not going to be doing anything, I don't see why you should delay until it's 3 years. The system panel blinked, and Ryuk's chewing paused. You want me to return to Amamura? He asked. If you've got everything done, then maybe. The panel blinked, and he resumed chewing. No need to rush things. Besides, I'm not really all done here. He sat upright, removing the stalk from his mouth, with his gaze focused. Let's analyze something, Ryuk said to the system, which blinked. And that is? The dragons, if alive, are with the Hallowworms. The Hallowworms are one of the 3 supreme races, and the 3 supreme races maintain order through the EAR. I thought the maintaining order part was just a dumb bluff. The system blinked, and he nodded. Yes, it is, and that's why I have zero interest in joining the EAR. Noted. The 3 supreme races are the highest hierarchy that exists in this universe. Null said they're so powerful that we are all nothing but ants to them. It makes one thing clear, Ryuk said, pausing, but the panel continued. The Nihility stage is not the peak of cultivation. You nailed it, he said, clicking his fingers. Back on Endearth, the highest cultivation stage known was Eternity. But he had met Aster, who had revealed to him that there were more cultivation stages, Apocrypha, Exogenes, and Nihility. He had met Odette, who was a monster at the Nihility stage, and succeeded in defeating her without using full power. Then he had met Seer and Zera, also at the Nihility stage, and once more he had defeated them both. He had met the Calamities, most of whom were also at the Nihility stage, and defeated them. He had met with the Ancient Elders, who were also all at the Nihility stage, and he destroyed them. So it was safe to say he was well beyond the Nihility stage at this point. But if the Nihility stage was the peak of cultivation, how could he be beyond it? Besides, he had seen the power of Null. Null was powerful, insanely so, almost as strong as Ryuk himself, if not stronger. So obviously, Null was also beyond Nihility. Yet he had been tied up easily by Faith Vorgoth. That made another thing obvious. Faith Vorgoth was beyond both Null and him, who were beyond the Nihility stage. And then there were the three supreme races who, compared to them, they were all nothing but ants. That made one thing clear. The Nihility stage was never the peak of cultivation, and most likely isn't close. But that realization also brought a question. If Nihility isn't the peak of cultivation, then what stage is? What stage am I now that I am beyond Nihility? What stage is Faith Vorgoth, who is beyond me? And what stage of cultivation are the supreme races, who are above us all? Ryuk had no idea the answers to these questions nor an inkling of what they could be. But in that moment, the panel flashed. I guess there's only one way to know, it said. And what way is that? Join the supreme races. The effect was immediate, like a silent bomb going off inside him, sending his heartbeat racing. The supreme races? He had expected a go around and ask, or return to Faith Vorgoth and ask him. But the system had actually asked him to join the supreme races. They are the source of all of this and obviously know everything. If you ever hope to grow beyond who you are now, they already possess the knowledge you seek. And chances are, only they hold the true secret to ascending to the next level of power. Joining them gives you the quickest route to power. It explained further, and Ryuk finally understood. If an ant wishes to learn the secrets of the gods, it cannot go to its fellow ants for help, because if they truly knew the way to become gods, then obviously they would have already become one. The best thing it could do was join the gods themselves. And by joining, it wasn't deluding himself that he was now one of them. No. It was for him to spy on them, see what secrets they hid, and learn them for himself. Then, with the secrets learned and the power achieved, he could decide if he wants to rub shoulders with them, or grow to a power level enough to erase or rule over them all. That's a reasonable plan, indeed. But how do I join them? They mention there are three, so which race do I join, the Hallowworms or the Luminarchs or the Dayborns? Where are they even? And will they willingly ever allow something they consider ants to join their ranks? He thought quietly, and the panel flashed. That's something you'll have to figure out on your own. That was fair enough. The system wasn't all-knowing, but in a way it was. Most likely it already had the information fully stored in its database, but there were usually locks on it. Locks that required Ryuk to know a little something about the information, like the name, to unlock the rest of what was stored in the database. Now he had a new goal, one that was enough to lift him from his depressive state. A quiet gleam of conviction returning to his eyes. He would try to find out more about the three supreme races in an attempt to join them and learn their secrets of power. He had seen power. He had seen what the most magical things it could do, bringing back even those who had died to life. That single realization, coupled with his new conviction, created an abyss of hope in his heart. Maybe one day, with enough of that power, he could bring back Uncle Bob, the one death that, no matter how much time passed, still left a sting of regret and helplessness every time he remembered it. Maybe one day, with enough of that power, he could bring back the dragons even if they had been erased, and he could still see her. I know what I want now, he mused quietly, rising to his feet. His eyes rose, looking reflecting the purple starlight void, and in the next moment, air began whipping around him as an insane amount of conviction burst out through the sky. This world is mad. A cycle of madness that repeats itself endlessly. Death, pain, regret, war, over and over and over, and those strong enough to prevent or even slow down the circle have no interest in doing so. He mused quietly, turning to his raised hands, watching it slowly clench into a fist. They have instead chosen to become a group of mad beings sitting on thrones they didn't deserve, watching all of this to quell their boredom. His eyes shut close at this point, silence reigning for a while before a flicker of light reappeared. For that reason, I have decided. I will rewrite this madness. Even if it won't be perfect, then at least those who create this cycle of madness just to quell their boredom obtained from having near-eternal life will not exist any longer. Neither will eternal life be made to serve them. If this is all I can do, then I can see that cycle slowing down a lot. He mused quietly, and in that moment, the phantom of a being appeared behind Everlearn. The silhouette of a dragon whose mere size blanketed the entire sky of the Stella clan. But that silhouette appeared only for a second before fading off as Ryuk's clenched fists relaxed, the air whipping around him dispersing. The flowers around him continued their natural rhythm as if nothing had happened. The conviction flickering in his eyes dispersed as well, though it was never lost, merely pushed down into the farthest depths of his gaze. He quietly turned, and in the far distance, a dot of light grew larger with every passing second. It darted here and there, but its gaze soon fixed on him, and in the next moment, it shot forward at incredible speed. The light grew clearer as it approached, finally revealing a figure who collided with him, carrying him off his feet with her momentum. They soared through the air for a moment before crashing to the ground, rolling across the field until coming to a stop. "Aster," he called, as giggles spilled from her lips, her purple starlight eyes staring at him from above, a teasing smile playing on her face. "Are you really an SS-level chaotic being? You've become as light as a feather." She grinned, and before he could even utter a word, she leaned in, pressing her lips to his. The air whipped around them, tossing strands of blue and purple hair across the garden in a whirlwind of color. When they parted, she held that satisfied smirk that made him roll his eyes, saying, "Not even a please? Can I kiss you very hard?" Giggle. "No, because you're mine now." In the purple-colored room, where every material seemed to have been chosen simply for the beauty and design, there, sitting cross-legged on the bed, was Aster. She spread her hands wide, and a soft void of starlight formed, flecked with gentle purple sparks drifting in the darkness. Her hair swirled quietly around her, but a hint of strain could be seen, with beads of sweat sliding down her face. "Struggling with an assignment?" The voice suddenly echoed through the room, and her eyes snapped open. The concentration was lost, and the void of starlight around her quickly dispersed. She sighed softly and looked toward the entrance, where Ryuk rested by the door, watching her with a gentle, amused expression. "I'll get it eventually. I swear it. I just need more time," she said, trying to focus back. "Are you close to the deadline?" he asked, noticing her rush, and she nodded softly. "Actually, yeah. We'll be called forward to the class to show it to Lord Stella tomorrow. The others can already materialize, and I can't even get the domain to encircle me." She mused angrily, spreading her fingers to push out the starlight. "The others are full-blooded Stellas, aided by their natural starlight bloodline, making things so much easier for them. So maybe don't be so hard on yourself," Ryuk said, stepping into the room. Aster sighed, collapsing onto her back in exhaustion. "I know, but Lord Stella isn't a full-blooded Stellas, too. She's exactly like me, and can obviously form the domain, perhaps even wide enough to encircle the entire Stellas clan. She wouldn't care for that excuse, and even if she does, I don't want to give her an excuse." Aster said, continuing, "I want to show her I'm not any lesser, that I can do it too." In that moment, Ryuk saw the conviction in her eyes and also noticed it extinguishing the second they appeared. He had an inkling why, and it wasn't because she didn't want to prove to Lord Stella that she truly could. It was because she was exhausted from holding on to that for so long. With that realization, a few ideas crossed his mind, and he quietly came to a decision. How about he called to her, as she raised her head, finding his hands reaching for her. She unconsciously grabbed at them. "We do it together," he completed, and she giggled. "You're not even a Stellas, nor do you even have starlight energy flowing through you," she said, and he smiled. "It's not being a Stellas." With his right hand holding hers, his other hand reached out, passing silently through the world, and she watched as every place it touched turned to a blank sheet of white. The walls disappeared, the mirrors, her desks, and soon enough, She found herself floating silently in a void of blank white. The bed was nowhere to be seen, and gravity seemed to vanish, letting her float upright. And this is a domain? She mused, looking at the whiteness that surrounded them both. Ryuk slowly let go of the hold, and she watched as he silently moved back. But her eyes quickly focused when she noticed purple lines appearing over his hands, radiating motes of starlight, the same energy in her. How did you? See, domains are an illusion, Aster, Ryuk explained as both of his starlight hands slowly came to each other. The only thing giving them reality is your own wish, along with a touch of starlight energy to make it come true. The important question is... His fingers folded quietly, forming a runic seal. Do you really wish to create a domain of starlight? Or do you simply want to earn a nod of approval from Lord Stella? He asked, and her heartbeat rose as the question echoed through her head repeatedly. She watched him fall silent, eyes closed in concentration, and her jaw dropped as a pillar of starlight erupted from the seal his fingers had formed. As it rose high into the air, it infiltrated the surroundings, and soon enough, the white void around them was completely replaced by a void of darkness illuminated by dots of starlight. It was the same stralite domain which she was finding so difficult to create. How Aster whispered in disbelief, watching as Ryuk opened his eyes, now fully the same purple as hers. He raised a finger toward her, slowly tracing a silent circle. A vortex of starlight opened, and from its depths, Aster's eyes widened as dark purple butterflies spilled toward her. She unconsciously stepped back, but couldn't avoid them, watching them surround her. Her eyes opened, seeing no harm in them, and quickly she watched as his arms began to move around him. It appeared like a dance of creation as from the empty void. Grass of starlight sprouted, mountains of purple rising in the distance, and the void began to transform. The result was a valley formed from starlight, and the breeze blew, sending her hair flying. It was so real, felt so real, she couldn't wrap her mind around it. She turned forward, finding him before her, his hands placed gently beneath her neck, just above her chest. All you really need is a wish for it to come true. He punched after, and she gasped, finding herself falling into the deep sea. As she quickly tried to hold her breath and regain her bearing, her eyes widened in awe as a starlight whale swam towards her. Her hands unconsciously reached forward toward its snout, feeling its warmth, yet in the next moment, it burst, releasing a surge of force that pushed her through the water. She shut her eyes, but quickly opened them only to find herself now falling through a void of starlight. She looked up and found him, Ryuk, who remained standing while she fell. His starlight eyes looked into hers, a comforting smile on his lips. Remember, it's all only an illusion that you just have to wish for. Only an illusion that I have to wish for? Aster said after him, and quietly, her eyes slowly shut as she sank into the fall. Mid-fall, both her arms spread apart. The sound of his heartbeat rising echoed out, and Ryuk watched quietly from above, his starlight eyes bearing hope. Within her mind's eyes, Astralaxia could envision a world of starlight, like the Stellus clan, with the high-rising castles, grounds, and bridges of starlight. In the next moment, she lay horizontally as she fell, and then she spun, her hand flowing around her. In that moment, every part of her skin changed, gaining a halo of starlight, making her resemble a true Stellus, and an impossible amount of starlight burst out of her. Her falling motion halted instantly in midair, and with wide eyes, Ryuk watched as the void of starlight around him gently dissipated. What took its place wasn't just a void of starlight. He floated to the side as a castle's pillar erupted into the skies. Quickly, they began forming. Pathways, buildings, bridges, floating rivers of starlight. Incredible. Aster landed on her feet, right atop the bridge. Her eyes opened, and within them, the purple dots swirled, giving the impression of a galaxy with celestial bodies gracefully orbiting within. She looked around her, and her mind reeled. Even though everything was now formed from her will, she still could not believe she had managed to do it, And she didn't just do it. Her domain manifested as the entirety of the Stellus clan. The sound of clapping echoed through the air, and she lifted her gaze to see Ryuk slowly descending. "Quite impressive," he said, landing steadily on the bridge. He was surprised. The bridge was indeed solid, though he could still see some runes showing it wasn't perfect. "I never would have learned it without you," Aster said. But Ryuk shook his head. "No, not really. You would have eventually gotten tired of trying to prove how extraordinary you are to Lord Stella, and once that is gone, you will be able to form it." "I do agree it would have taken time," though he replied, continuing, "Still, you wiped off my world, and now I will have to wipe yours out and establish mine. Stop me if you dare," he said with an evil grin, and Aster watched as he quickly swept his hands to both sides, erasing the bridge, sending her plummeting into the river. "Hey!" she shouted, but he was already before the castle, his hands reaching out and turning them back into mountains. "No way!" In the next second, Aster burst out of the river, swinging her hands up, and the bridge immediately reformed. Flashing into the sky, a large hand of stars appeared, swatting Ryuk away, and her other hand reached out, quickly reforming the castle. But Ryuk was already before one of the structures on the ground, quickly turning it into grassland. She chased after, turning them back, and the battle of creation quickly continued. He could see it. The incomplete runes were becoming more complete every time, giving the buildings more solid form as she tried to reform them, and after about 6 cycles of destruction, Ryuk raised his hands to change the castle of Starlight, but it remained unshakable, having gained a true, solid form. Aster appeared by his side a moment later, noticing Ryuk's struggle to tear apart the castle she had built, and that's when it occurred to her. The buildings, which had formerly looked like Starlight and had never gained true solid form, had now solidified completely. She has been so focused on trying to stop him from erasing her domain that she never even realized. His hands rubbed the purple walls of the castle before taking them off. "Now, this is perfect," he said with a smile, his hands moving to the side a moment later. As they phased through the world of Starlight, the world began returning. Her wardrobe, her mirror, her bed, everything reappeared, and Aster opened her eyes to see herself still lying on the bed. What just happened? She whispered in disbelief, struggling to comprehend it all. In reply, Ryuk said, "Try forming the Starlight domain now." She sat upright, taking a quiet breath, and her eyes shut close in concentration. Starlight began to bloom within her, transforming her body from solid to ethereal. As she stretched her hands wide, the light spread outward, soon filling the entire room. "I can do it now," Aster said, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her hand swerved to the side, and a building was conjured, pausing when it reached her ceiling. She drew back her hands before waving them up, and a pathway quickly unfurled, stretching from beneath her to Ryuk's feet. "I can really do it," she muttered in disbelief. To think she grasped it so fast. Truly impressive. Ryuk mused in pride, seeing the various creations quickly arising and filling the room. But then it all paused, and he saw the Damian unfurling. "Huh?" He turned back to Aster, his face changing as he tried to swerve to the side, but he was still too slow. She knocked into him, sending them both flying atop the bed. "You naughty star, can you be more gen?" The words were cut off before he could finish them, his eyes rolling back as he sank into that pleasant feeling. It paused after a while, and he looked up to find Aster's starlight eyes staring dreamily at him, hard to conceal their excitement. "Thank you," she whispered, laying her head on his chest, to conceal the blush on her cheeks. Though his heartbeat was slow, barely once every 5 seconds, each beat resonated deeply, sending a reverberation that stirred both fear and awe in her, as if she were lying upon something far beyond her imagination. But even greater than that fearful feeling was a feeling of excitement that coursed through her with every beat, that was born from her body, knowing it was lying so close to something far beyond her. "You're welcome," Ryuk whispered, gently hugging her back, his face buried beneath her hair. When he closed his eyes, he felt the darkness zoom, and then he reopened them. But he didn't open them to the sight of her. He opened his eyes to a pitch-black void, and in the far depths, a humongous blue eye emerged, so immense that Ryuk seemed like nothing more than a tiny speck of dust before it. The being before him made his eyes flash in pure awe, but then he smiled, realizing, this is the real me. The planetary-sized eye gazing at him was unmistakably his own. Beyond it stretched a draconic body of immense scale, so vast that Ryuk could not even glimpse its end. Each inch of its scales radiated an incomparably powerful aura, capable of engulfing entire stars. This colossal form was Ryuk's true body, the vessel that held all his true body parts. This was the true Ryuk Null. Can you feel the power it holds? The system panel blinked as Ryuk's hands quietly reached forward, landing on the dragon's snout. His eyes quietly closed for a while, his heartbeat sinking deeper and slower until it matched the dragon's tempo. But before both could fully resonate, he withdrew his hands, and the creature's ginormous eyes slowly zipped shut. It's too destructive. Back then, before he had his full body parts, he had already surpassed the nihility stage. Now that all of his body parts had fused into one, his Null bloodline mixed perfectly with his Jade Dragon bloodline, along with his prideful Beyonder Dragon bloodline. This draconic form of his held all of that together, unifying it into a single complete existence. But that existence wasn't peaceful. It was a slumbering incarnation of destruction, and he felt power radiating from each of its dormant scales, a power that could potentially destroy worlds by simply being near them. If those scales were to activate, then, for how long will you keep it hidden? For as long as it's needed. He replied softly, drifting away from the void and succumbing to its darkness. When he opened his eyes, it was to the sight of a pair of worried eyes staring back at him. Ryuk? Ryuk? Are you okay? Aster's voice echoed out. I am. What's wrong? He asked, watching her turn her attention to his chest and place both palms over it. She remained quiet for a while before a relieved smile crossed her face. Your heart beat for a moment. It felt so quiet, she said, continuing to rest on his chest. For a moment, his heartbeat had barely thumped, even after a full 30 seconds, alarming her. But now it was back to normal. Quietly, she drifted off to sleep once more. The world outside slowly darkened, and Ryuk could see the corner of the sky through the window, watching stars drift across the purple sky. There was warmth from her hug and peace from the drifting stars. And for a moment, he fell into quiet contemplation of the past. He remembered them all, old Jack, Mrs. Linnea, Odette, and Morgaine. Now that he thought about it, they were like a little family of their own. He remembered Mad White and Enderth. Both had gone through their darkest challenges and succeeded. Even though during those times, he had been so focused on retrieving his stolen parts from the Nulls and growing stronger at all costs. Now that he could finally slow down, he saw those moments more clearly. Only now did he truly appreciate them. I will return to them soon, he mused quietly to himself. A smile tugged at his lips as he whispered, and maybe it wasn't all just for naught. Maybe it was actually worth it. Funny how it was the little things that ended up mattering in the end. The system panel flashed in that moment, and he chuckled, nodding. Yes, it really was the little things. Good thing you didn't abandon them in search of the things you felt were more important. It was right again. If he had indeed ignored them to grow stronger, there would be no place for him to return to now, or happy memories to dwell on, especially after realizing that his main goal had become more or less meaningless. I'm glad things worked out eventually, he murmured to himself, trying to drift off to sleep, but he couldn't. For some reason, every time he closed his eyes, he was pulled back into the void where his draconic form was held. He had to return to his main body each time to keep Aster from waking up and worrying over his slowing heart. In the end, he remained wide awake, and that allowed him to think about his next step. It had been a week since he last set his goal to join the Supreme Races. The Stellus clan was a knowledge-based race, which meant there were countless halls filled with notes. Ryuk's favorite spot in the clan had quickly become the library, where he searched for any record related to the 3 supreme races. There were not many, which was unsurprising, but he now knew more than before. The three Supremes were exactly as Antares had said. The Luminarchs, the Dayborns, the Hallowworms. The Luminarchs were the most powerful. According to the ancient books he had read, they were referred to as the sun gods and were built for battle. They surpassed every race in the universe in pure brute strength and were greatly respected. Everlearn knew only one person who was a Luminarch. She was Ashra the God-destroyer, the other wielder of arcane energy like him. Even though Aravel had warned him that Null had sought Ashra's help to destroy him, she had never appeared. She was also referred to as a Luminarch in the books, but though the Luminarchs were the strongest, they were not the most feared. That status belonged to the Dayborns, a race not known for physical power, but feared far beyond those considered mighty. They were masters of mystic arts and referred to as the shaman gods, mostly worshipped by dark occultists. Everlearn had seen a few cultist arts back in Amamora, but after that, he hadn't encountered much and was unfamiliar with their power. The Dayborns were a mysterious race that he had no connection with or understanding of, making them the least appealing for him to join. The last of the supreme races was the Hallowworms, a bestial race and the ones responsible for the disappearance of the dragons. They were equally powerful and respected, and known as the beast gods. They were the most appealing for Ryuk to join, as doing so would bring him closer to understanding what became of the dragons. Besides, he had two draconic bloodlines within him, the Jade Dragon bloodline and the Beyonder Dragon bloodline, making him even more of a beast. Their path to power was surely one he could potentially walk with ease, and that made him decide. He would join the Hallowworms. And as for how he planned to achieve that, he already had a clear plan. Everlearn's journey is just starting, hence getting more focus. If you enjoy this adventure, feel free to explore my other books as well. I promise an even more exciting adventure. The answer to joining the three supreme races lies in the Trivy League, a competition held once every 100 years, where the greatest talents of the most supreme races in the upper realm gathered to compete. Afterward, they could earn the approval of those from the three supreme races, who would then take them in for further training. Only the most prodigious of geniuses were chosen, and the way to enter the competition wasn't fixed. There was a seal card called the Trivy card, already given to some powerful families in the upper realm, which they could bestow upon their students or other races they found appealing. Some of the geniuses in these families already held the card. Seizing the card from a genius who already held it was one way to join the competition. The Trivy League didn't exactly care who held the card, only who brought it to them before the final phase of the competition started. It was the most suitable way for Ryuk to enter the competition without giving the impression he was there to spy, particularly since others like him would also be allowed in. And thankfully, only 2 months were left before the final phase of the competition began. Though in those 2 months he still had to find a way to get the Trivy card, and to do that he needed to leave the Stellus clan. He closed his eyes once more, sinking deep within himself, and when he opened them again, he was standing before the humongous body of his draconic form. His hands reached out, landing on its snout as their heartbeats resonated. He made sure not to resonate fully, stopping when one of its eyes opened. "I need 2 clones." He said this quietly, and in the next moment, light spilled from the dragon's eyes, rapidly coalescing together. In less than 10 seconds, 2 more Ryuks stood before him, both in basic humanoid form. With that done, he sank back into his consciousness, and when he opened his eyes, he was back in Aster's room. Except now, 2 more of himself stood in the room. One of them gently moved, taking his position on the bed, while the true Ryuk slipped away. Aster was never disturbed from her sleep. Ryuk stood, the other clone waiting beside him. He crawled to the bed, giving her one last kiss on her forehead that made her smile in her sleep. "Goodbye now," he whispered before turning to the window, fading from the room along with the other clone. When they reached the purple sky of the Stellus clan, he turned to the clone beside him. "Return to Amamora." Without a word, it silently turned back and became a beam of light flashing into the distance. Each of these clones held enough of his real consciousness, enough to act and react exactly as he would. He could also share their sight, observe through them, or talk through them. though that wouldn't be needed since they shared his consciousness. They would react and talk as the original him would. Just like the system had said, there was no need to dilly-dally and spend years here if he was already done. So he had ordered one clone to return to Amamora, while the other remained with Astralaxia. Their relationship had only just started, and he felt it was wrong to disappear after only a week with her. That was why he left a part of himself with her. One realization dawned upon him as he stood atop a rooftop in the Stellus clan. My mission in the upper realm is done. Ever since he could remember, he had always been reacting to things. His fight with Zarkul and Morn happened because of Uncle Bob's death. It wasn't a choice, he simply had to fight. And fighting the rest of the Null Calamities wasn't really a choice for him either. Otherwise, they would have killed and ripped him apart. Every one of his battles had been chosen for him. But this was the end of that. Now, he was walking this journey because he chose to see for himself where the peak of power lay so he could bring some sanity to this mad world. He wasn't forced to take this path. He could return to Amamora with Aster, and they would live their lives undisturbed by anything or anyone. Unless it was the supreme races, he doubted anything could be a real threat to him right now. He would be absolutely comfortable wherever he chose to stay now, but he had still chosen this. And that feeling. For the first time in his life, he was doing something not because he had no choice, but because he wanted to. It gave rise to a quiet, unfamiliar sensation inside him. One he could feel when he placed his hand on his chest, yet couldn't put into words. He remained on the rooftop in quiet stillness for a moment before turning to look behind him. Floating silently in the purple sky was a being who seemed to merge with it. A lady with a star-like body. Lord Stella. He watched her hover forward until she landed on the building beside him. Two of her upper eyes opened, settling on him. She glanced toward Aster, noticing his other clone, and then turned her gaze back to him. You're leaving, she said. He nodded. In a way. Do you plan to join the Trivy League? She asked the question calmly. He wasn't surprised that she knew. He had sensed her presence around him for the past week while he read the manuals in the library, seemingly keeping an eye on his every move, though he had acted as if he didn't notice.
Ido.
And why would you want that? She asked as Ryuk's brow faintly knitted. I mean, the Trivy League is a bloody competition. More than 1,000 geniuses die in the initial fight to secure the Trivy card, and more than 100 of the best end up dead in the final phase. The Stellus clan is a peaceful place, far away from the dangers of the Trivy League, so it would be more reasonable to stay here instead. She wasn't wrong. Many indeed died because of the Trivy League. It even had an uncommon name, Burial Grounds of Geniuses. The singular event that swallows about 70% of geniuses in the upper realm every century. Thank you for your care, Lord Stella, Ryuk said, turning his back to her before jumping off the castle walls. He landed with a solid thud, easily absorbing the shock of the fall, then quietly made his way out of the grounds. Lord Stella witnessed all of this with furrowed eyebrows. He had not responded to her question, and as much as she felt compelled to force the answer out of him, something in the back of her mind warned her not to act rashly. Even though he appeared completely ordinary, with not the slightest energy of any sort rippling from him, like a non-cultivator who had never absorbed any energy from birth, that ordinariness was spine-chilling, even for a being like her. As Ryuk walked out of the Stellus clan, what lay beyond those starlight gates was an unending bridge of purple, trailing as far as his eyes could see. Quietly, he continued his path, his gaze occasionally drifting downward. Beneath the bridge, the same starlight liquid flowed, its gurgling sound filling the air. He had 2 months to find a Trivy card. That was enough time, even though he had no idea which race or genius held one. And more importantly, he wanted to see Isha and Void before he left, both of whom he also had no idea where exactly they were. At this point, you might just spend 1 year and still not find them. The system panel flashed as Ryuk finally crossed the lengthy bridge. It had taken him more than 3 hours to walk the entire span, and now before him was another unending valley of green grass. Scattered across random areas were humanoid beings wearing large hats and ordinary clothing, baskets behind them as they worked through the grass. His gaze lingered on 5 of the nearest figures before he made his choice. Sliding down the valley, he skied rapidly down the slope, landing on the lower ground before walking the remaining distance of about 50 kilometers. From 20 meters away, one of the figures working on the grass noticed him and rose upright, though not fully. It was an old man, a bit different from normal humans. His nose was like a rabbit's, and his long ears matched. Those features were what distinguished him from regular humans. The old man's eyes displayed fear and reverence at the sight of the being walking towards him, and when it reached 10 meters away, he fell to both knees. "O great Stellus immortal, for what reason could you have blessed this pathetic soul of mine with your presence?" he said, hands laid flat on the ground as he quivered. "You're not a pathetic soul, and I'm not a Stellus immortal," Ryuk replied. The man paused. You're not?" He took a second, more careful look. The figure before him was a young man, dressed in a simple shirt and trousers of white. But the whites of his clothes were so white they seemed out of this world, and his white hair was whiter than the freshest snow. But truly, he did not radiate a terrifying aura, nor was he floating in the sky like the Stellus immortals normally would. Is there something I can help you with, great immortal?" he asked hesitantly. "It's Ryuk, and you need not remain on your knees." The old man nodded and stood, though still slightly crouched. Ryuk turned his gaze forward and pointed. "If I continue in that direction to the end of the valley, what would I find?" The man glanced toward where he pointed. "An unending sea," he replied. Ryuk swerved his hand to the west. "And if I continue in that direction, an endless range of mountains. And this direction?" he asked, pointing to the east. "You will still find the unending sea." "And behind me?" Ryuk asked, pointing to where he had come from. The old man paused for a moment before responding. "The mighty Stellus clan." Ryuk nodded. "Then I will come with you to your clan." The old man's lips opened and closed. Bringing an immortal back to their small clan? As much as he wanted to refuse, he was unable to muster any words of resistance, and in the end, he could only nod. As much as the man was obliged to lead him straight there, Ryuk chose to wait leisurely by the side until they finished their work for the day. The old rabbit man watched the immortal, a leaf stalk resting at the corner of his lips, with both hands folded behind his head, his clothes and hair whipping around from the gentle breeze. He did not speak a word, just sinking leaf stalks, chewing them completely before replacing them with another. It was the first time the old man had seen someone so absolutely carefree. Very different from the rest of the Stellus immortals, who always flashed past in a blur, seemingly in a hurry to get somewhere. The day raced by, and before long, the moon rose, signaling the end of the day's labor. The rest of the rabbit man's race gathered around him, though their eyes revealed caution, noticing the lying Ryuk nearby. "This time, immortal Ryuk. It's Ryuk." There were 5 more around the old man. 3 of them were men. They had lean physiques and were short, about 1.8 meters tall. That should have been an alright height, but compared to Ryuk, who easily stands at 3 meters, they were short. Each of them had the same bunny nose and ears, though they noticeably had different hair colors. The other 2 were women, even shorter, about 1.6 meters tall, but visibly much older. "The portal back to our humble clan is just a few kilometers away. Please come," the old man said respectfully as he led Ryuk forward, and their entire group continued forward. Midway, he could hear the others whispering to the old man as they asked where he was from and why he was following them. Though he could hear every whisper as if they were uttering it directly in his ears, he wasn't much bothered by the gossip and ignored it. They walked faster than expected, almost hopping with each step, and soon he came to what seemed like a normal grassy area, the steep corner of a valley ascending upward. The old man walked towards the valley, and Ryuk watched as his hands changed into a paw. A rabbit-like paw but with claws, which he dug into the valley like a key of some sort, swinging his hand here and there. The sharp sound of a key being unlocked echoed out, and the old man took back his claws. In the next moment, a tunnel whose surface was covered by a ripple pool of void energy appeared. "In here," the man said, Then he jumped in, with the others following soon after. It appeared quite small, small enough that it couldn't contain him, but Ryuk wasn't too worried. With a simple will, the space around him began to shrink like a ball that constricted further and further. As it did, Ryuk's size also constricted, and in the next moment the ball flowed into the void portal. The moment he disappeared, the entrance closed tightly, blending seamlessly with the valley's edge, becoming nearly invisible. He expected the usual feeling of teleportation, but this was much different. It was like being hurled through a zigzagging tunnel beneath the earth, and in the next instant, they were blasted downward. Ryuk landed firmly on both feet. The second he did, he found countless eyes on him as the motion of everyone around came to a halt. Then all hell broke loose in the next moment. Men, women, children, each sprinting away into mountainous walls with holes in them while screaming at the top of their lungs. An immortal has come to get rid of us all. Run. Ryuk found everything quite amusing. The place was underground, very clearly, with mountainous feet underground and a sky of earth above. Their houses were circular burrows at the foot of these mountains, and there were a couple of structures with leaves and various fruits displayed, making it seem like a little primitive settlement. There was no magic or runic tech anywhere in sight. Moments later, the streets grew quiet, and Ryuk noticed a cloud of dust drifting toward them. It was about a couple of dozen rabbit men riding these fearsome-looking bunnies with sharpened spears in their hands. Each quickly surrounded him and the little group he had followed here. "Quick! State your purpose here," one of them roared out, and Ryuk pointed at his bunny nose. "If you shout once more, I'll kill you." The words made every one of them halt the next words in their throats. There's a difference between a simple fact and an actual threat, and the way he said it didn't feel threatening in the least. "The quiet is nice, no?" he asked after the silence endured before turning to the old man. "If you don't mind, can you lead me to the leader of the settlement? I have a request," he said, as the old man's brows furrowed deeply. "I'm afraid I'm not high enough to stand before the clan elder." "Ha ha ha," he said, laughing nervously, but Ryuk continued forward, signaling him to come. I'm sure he or she wouldn't mind this time. The old man could only swallow, following after him, but this time not with the rest. It was just him and Ryuk. The guards had originally been sent to bring the intruder back to the leader's home, but now that Ryuk had chosen to go there himself, one could say their mission was being completed, right? Well, except that the invader ought to be in chains, bonded tight, but he was walking freely. The settlement wasn't big, so the journey wasn't that far. It only took 5 minutes before they arrived at quite the eye-catching place. They reached the entrance of a large cave, dark at first, but as they walked in, purple light from the stones around the cave illuminated the space. The sound of water flowing hit them as they came before a bridge, beneath which was a weird purple star liquid, and at the end was a house. One that made a flicker cross through Ryuk's eyes. While he had expected a mountain with homes carved into it, like the rest of the settlement, this was entirely different. It was actually a castle-like structure, towering about 15 meters high and adorned with purple gems. It felt like stepping into a completely different world, sparking Ryuk's curiosity about the kind of leader who ruled these bunnies. "Respectfully, this is as far as I can go," the old man said to Ryuk as they all paused before the gates. He was about to turn when the massive doors burst open, and he instantly dropped to a knee, the rest of the guards following suit. "Clan Elder," they called out, but when Ryuk saw the clan elder, he was at a loss for words. The same was easily true for the one who was said to be the clan leader, and Ryuk clasped his forehead. "Mamma mia, Ryuk!" the clan leader screamed out in shock, the carrot in its paws falling to the ground. Of course, it was Void. The Void Cat, though calling him that was weird now, as Void had grown very, very bigger. But one other thing caught Ryuk's eye about him, and that was the bulging sack-like stomach that Void had gotten now. "You've even grown fat, huh? Life must be good," he said as Void looked down at the fat on its body and smiled coquettishly. "You know, to be a leader, you must have some special bodily aura. So honestly, I was forced to put on some more fat on myself, to better impose order amongst these lousy rabbits." And speaking of the rabbits who lay bowing, Void roared, "You'll be lost." The second he said that, the rabbits quickly scurried off into the distance, including the old man who had followed him. He was far gone before Ryuk could even thank him for his help. He could only turn his furrowed eyes to Void, who snickered in mockery, looking at the scurrying rabbits. "Ha ha ha, peasants!" He mocked, only to find a hand reaching for his face, but it never touched before Void puffed away, and Ryuk grabbed nothing but air. He turned, and there was Void hovering 10 meters away, whilst snickering in victory at being able to evade him. He could only roll his eyes at the sight, continuing into the castle. "Judging from how you built everything in the shape of the Stellus clan, I'm sure you must have paid a couple of visits around," Ryuk said, stepping into the large hall. Even the marbles on the ground bore the same purple starlight design as the Stellus clan. "Yes, a bastard with a goatee dragged us out of that garden of yours and separated us, keeping me in some smelly cage with some smelly tigers. Let me guess you sneaked away," Ryuk asked, as Void snickered. "Oh Ryuk, you do know me a lot. In less than an hour of being there, I was out. I bet those fools didn't even notice until maybe 5 days later. Kakik. Idiots. I tried searching for you, but I lost the connection for some reason. I remember the woman who took you looked like Starlight, so I did some brushing around and found out she was a Stellus. So I came to the Stellus clan. And you were kicked out before you could find me?" Ryuk asked as Void's whiskers twitched. "I swear those Stellus bastards are pretty good at Void manipulation. The first day I went in, I moved freely around until that bastardly star woman threw me out. I tried sneaking in for a second try, but their entire clan was sealed tight, blocking Void teleportation. The Void barrier was so damn complicated, I spent days trying to crack it, yet still failed. In the end, I could only accept my fate of being banished to these godforsaken underground, where you get your cheeks stuffed with carrots all day long and grow some fat around that slippery body of yours," Ryuk completed, as Void wiggled his way over. "You know, I didn't choose this for myself. I was forced into this because I had no choice. But I made it home still, don't you think? Yeah, right. You know, Ryuk, you gotta make use of what you've got instead of wishing for better. I wonder what criminal book you read that from." Ryuk mused under his breath, and Void scoffed. "You underestimate me. I got that from deep life experience. Anyway, you know Aster's alive, right? She came in with that star woman who captured you. And she thought painting her hair purple would make me not recognize her? TSK, damn traitor," Void said, only to find a hand reaching for his head once more. But then it quickly puffed away, dodging it. "I just want to give you a head pat for your hard work," Ryuk said with a smile that chilled Void to the bones. "Nah, I'm good. Aster isn't a traitor. It was a coincidence being with Lord Stella," he explained as Void hummed. "Anyway, why are you so weak?" It noted. "You move so slowly, and you don't seem to have the slightest energy in you at all. Don't tell me you got your ass crippled," it said, snickering mockingly as it puffed before Ryuk's face, sliding its tail under his nose. Ryuk snatched toward the tail, but it evaded once more before he could grab it, and quickly Void did it 10 times, laughing heartily as Ryuk failed to grab it each time. "Hey, loser," Void mocked as Ryuk turned to him with drooping eyes before he shrugged it off. "Stop tempting fate, Void. Where's Isha?" he asked, turning to a glassware in the wall that held a fancy-looking ring like treasure. He opened the glass, grabbing at the ring, but a tiny vortex opened at the last second, and it disappeared, appearing in Void's hands instead. "Isha, I faintly felt her connection for a while, but I lost it quickly after losing your connection. She should be in those weird snow plains I read about, but knowing Isha and her bad luck, it's probably a place that is hard to sneak out from or into," Void mused, looking at its fancy ring. He had taken this ring from a really hard place to infiltrate. His eyes widened a moment later when Ryuk appeared before another glassware, his hand reaching for a golden-looking fishbone. But just like before, Ryuk failed once more as Void quickly teleported it off before he could grab it. "Where'd you get these treasures of yours from, anyway?" Ryuk asked, looking around the hall, where fancy-looking treasures were hung on altars. How greedy a cat to display its own treasure, eyeing them all the time in this grandiose palace. Trust me, Ryuk. Each of them is a prize for a difficult job well done. Void said pridefully. And by a difficult job well done, you mean stealing, right? Got it. Ryuk said with a shrug, heading out of the palace. TSK. You break my fragile heart with such accusations. Where you going? I've still got some special places to show you in my casa. Void said as it rapidly puffed after Ryuk. We're leaving. Where? To find Isha, Ryuk replied, and Void rushed back into his castle. Wait, I gotta pack my treasures. Ryuk waited quietly, the ringing in his ears lingering from the castle's plundering. He was even more speechless when he witnessed the entire building crashing down on itself, with Void puffing to his side at the last moment. You destroyed the place? He asked, looking at the cat, which had a sorrowful expression. Yes, I destroyed my beautiful palace. But why? Because it's simply too precious for these peasant rabbits to step in, he said, watching Ryuk clasp his head. What? I told those useless things to help me build it, and they molded out a hut for me, wasting 70% of the materials. I had to go through hell to get new materials, then another hell to mold it from the ground up, all with my claws. There's no way in hell I'm leaving this for their sorry ass. Void claimed. So you choose to destroy all of your hard work then, even when you could have peasants worshipping its otherworldly design. Yep, Void said with no hard feelings at all, swerving his butt out. Stingy bastard, Ryuk muttered beneath his breath, following behind. So out of my infinite mercy, I have been able to bring your lousy old leader back to life. Enjoy, Void said in the town square, around which were gathered all of the rabbit races. Ryuk had asked him to notify the race that he was leaving, so they could pick a new leader. Then, unexpectedly, Void went into a hole in the mountain and pulled out a sorry-looking bunny man in chains. And now he was learning that this was the so-called old leader, who, according to Void, had died and had chosen him as the new leader before his death. That was how Void had become the leader, kidnapping the old leader, beating him to a pulp and hiding him away. And now that he was leaving, he simply brought out the older leader again, claiming he had revived him to rule over them. Of course, the rabbit race didn't believe his words one bit, but if there was one thing he noticed, it was that they really feared Void. Give me one last bow of appreciation for all my help towards your primitive clan. Void shouted, and Ryuk's brow twitched, looking at the various rabbits quickly getting on their bellies. Now that's more like it, Void said with a prideful grin, catwalking out of the assembly. But he had not walked far when Ryuk's hand grabbed at his tail. It struggled to gasp for air, but couldn't escape in time as Ryuk ripped out a few strands of fur from its tail, causing the cat to let out a pained cry. You can take this as a souvenir for the pain you have endured, Ryuk said, passing the fur to the former elder of the clan. Thank you. I'll make sure to hang this where everyone can see, he said with a wide grin, and Void lost it, his head blowing up to twice its size. You bunny bastard, it screamed, racing towards the man. But before he could lay his paws on him, he paused, his hair standing on end as he looked behind, finding Ryuk, who was silently staring at him. But his eyes had completely changed. From the previous shining blue, his eyes had turned completely crimson, with a snake-like slit in the middle. They radiated a terrifying bloodlust, and in the next instant, Void quietly withdrew his claw and, without a word, turned toward the exit. Ryuk blinked once, and the slits in his eyes disappeared, his eyes' color returning to their bright and beautiful blue. He waved goodbye to the bunny race before also disappearing into the tunnel, after Void. When they both reappeared, it was right in the Valley of Green. So where exactly are we heading next? I heard the forward area is all sea, and the other side is a mountain range, he said to Void, who pointed its fat claw upwards. Did you ask what happens if we go through the sky? Huh? Ryuk turned his head upward, looking at the purple sky. For real? Of course, for real. The place is like heaven. There are upper heavens and lower heavens. If you go through the ground, I bet you'll find a race, but up is how I came here, though there is quite the difficult void formation," he said, flying higher into the sky, but quickly paused when he noted Ryuk still standing there. You waiting for someone?" I can't really fly," Ryuk said, as Void's brow quivered. What happened to you?" Wait, then were those eyes of yours back then just a bluff?" Void asked, remembering those eyes. They had exuded a power that would have dealt with him if he had touched that elder, forcing him to comply, yet now the same man simply scratched the back of his head, looking helpless. In the end, he could only roll his eyes as a void vortex appeared on the ground before Ryuk. He stepped in, appearing beside Void in the sky, only to be dragged down by gravity, but another vortex soon popped open, swallowing him, and he appeared higher. This way, they both continued higher into the sky. "Tisk, it's so much of a burden bringing with you someone so weak," Void complained in exasperation, opening a vortex again and again. "Well, now you can imagine how tiring it was to raise you from a tiny egg to this point, can't you?" Ryuk replied, and Void paused, his eye widening into circles. He felt exhausted, dragging Ryuk along because he couldn't fly. But now that he thinks about it, hasn't he been the same up until now? He had always been weaker than both Ryuk, needing to be carried along by him, and nurtured from weak to powerful. Yet he had never once felt that it could be tiring for Ryuk, until now. Wow, how come that has never crossed my mind before? Void? The call echoed through the air. "Yeah, what's up?" The reply came from none other than a fat Black Panther-looking cat who had a long claw stuck out of his fat paw, fiddling with a set of runes that covered the sky. You're taking a lot of time?" Ryuk asked as he fell downward, only to be swallowed by a vortex and reappear beside Void. Then fall again, only for another vortex to snatch him back each time. "Just arg, this damn lock. Those bastards must have made the rune more complicated to trap me here. Just give me a sec," Void said, continuing to fiddle with the void runes in the sky. Ryuk's brow twitched. "For real, Void? This is a basic runic lock, and you can't even unlock it?" he asked in disbelief. "Look, Ryuk," Void said, still fiddling with the lock, "I've spent about what now? 2 months in this place. I've repented a lot from my bad old ways, so suddenly being thrust back into it requires me to take some time to brush up on the experience. You get me? You sound like you need to get back in shape," Ryuk said, plummeting down once more before being lifted back up. If you mean that figuratively, then yeah, I agree." "No, Void. I mean it literally. 2 months of sitting on that grand throne, getting fed carrots endlessly, has gotten you fat and clumsy. You need to get back in shape." As he said that, Void suddenly switched his claws to the right side and then, clink, the sound of the keys unlocking rang out. "Yes, finally. Why you getting so frantic, Ryuk? Smee, the mighty Lord Void. I can pull anything off," Void claimed, grabbing Ryuk's legs before he could fall again. A void portal opened up in front of them. "Let's go," Void said, trying to drag him inside, but Ryuk looked at the portal with his eyes narrowing. Void? You sure you opened the right portal?" he asked. "TSK, are you really doubting what the mighty Lord Void can do?" Void scoffed before quickly dragging Ryuk into the portal. The world darkened for just a minute, but once it brightened, "Mamma mia!" Void screamed, yanking his head back. Ryuk's eyes dimmed as he found the edge of a spear pointed directly at his nose. They were surrounded by dozens of humanoid, winged experts, all with their weapons aimed at their noses as the two stood trapped in a tight circle. "Void?" Ryuk called out, feeling the tail behind him stiffen. I think I might have fallen for the basic redirection runes on the lock." Void. Ryuk, mistakes happen all the time. All you gotta do is learn from it, then adapt better next time," Void said, and Ryuk clasped his head. "Where are your Dimension Cross cards?" one of the winged experts demanded. "Dimension Cross?" Ryuk repeated. "You need a Dimension Cross to legally cross through the heavens. Both of you are here trying to pass from the stellar heaven to the winged heaven, and that is only legal if you have a Dimension Cross. So where is it?" "Don't tell me you don't have one," the expert barked. "We forgot it at home?" Ryuk said. Ha ha ha. His clumsy reply made not just the guard, but even Void burst into hearty laughter. Really, Ryuk? The oldest lie in the book is the best you've got? What happened to that sweet tongue of yours? Arrest them, the guard leader bellowed. Spears immediately flew from every direction, but they never reached. Void's paw glowed with dark runic lines, and in the next moment, bang! He slammed them onto the ground, unfurling a powerful tempest of void energy that twisted space into a giant vortex. All the guards ran into it and were sucked in instantly. In an instant, only Ryuk, Void, and the leader of the guards remained. You bastards! The leader shouted, rushing toward them and stabbing his spear toward Ryuk's chest. But then, bang! A second burst of void energy appeared, creating a vortex that caught the boss's spear before he was instantly sucked in. I hope you can run, Void said, and in the next moment, he puffed out of existence, reappearing at the distant gate. That distance, nearly 50 meters, was crossed in a puff. I guess we're back to that life. Huh? Ryuk said, sprinting forward. Get them. Damn trespassers. Vroom. The air flapped violently as Ryuk jerked his head aside, narrowly avoiding a spear that flew inches past his ear. Spears flew everywhere as they raced through the wide hall. Guards chased after them, flinging more spears, but Ryuk dodged everyone. He might lack firepower, but his reflexes were still insane, and his body was strong enough for sharp dodges even while running at high speed. Void had zero problems, puffing from one place to another as they rushed toward the grand door. Quick! Don't let them escape! The guard leader shouted, and immediately the guards leapt high, forming a wall before the gate. Ha, Void? Ryuk asked, ducking 3 times in 3 seconds to narrowly dodge 6 spears. Don't worry, I got this, Void said. His claws lit up once more as he slammed them onto the ground. They formed a rift of void energy that swam toward the guard blocking the door. But all of a sudden, the void ripple disappeared completely as a blue light illuminated from a figure who dropped down at the last second. It was the boss, now holding onto a blue gem. Ah, you think I'll fall for that twice? He said with a scoff. Ryuk glanced at Void. Oh, that's bad. A void crystal blocker, Void muttered. A void crystal blocker? Ryuk asked. It's a weird crystal around here that blocks any irregularity with the void, like me trying to teleport them off, Void explained. Ryuk stood there, speechless. Void? Yeah. Are we saying we're trapped? Huh? Technically, yes. Void's words left Ryuk dumbstruck. They had been captured by a group of experts in the Apocrypha stage. Not even Nihility, not even Exignis, but literal Apocrypha stage experts. Arrest them! The guard boss Duran shouted his command, and the guards immediately raced toward them. A spear quickly found its way toward Ryuk, whose left hand lurched forward toward it. Just before it stabbed into his palm, his hand, like a snake, instantly shifted, wrapping around the spear, and in the next moment, he jerked his hand backward. The guard was immediately thrown forward from the spear, and Ryuk's right elbow slammed upward, smashing into the guard's jaw. His head jerked upward from the force, a terrifying impact that sent the world around him darkening, and he collapsed immediately. But he was only one of dozens of guards. The roar of guards followed, spears piercing from all sides toward Ryuk's torso. Seeing the array of spears forming a circle, he immediately went down, dodging them before his right legs rolled out in a circular arc. They slammed into the legs of the guards, who were immediately knocked off their balance, some of them falling on their backs. Bang! A kick smashed into the face of a guard right from above, sending him down. Using his face as a hold, Ryuk jumped off, spinning in the air before stepping onto the face of another guard, and bouncing off once more. Bang! The boss watched, dumbfounded, as his guards were taken down one by one in the dumbest way he had ever seen. A face fall, an elbow strike, a simple leg sweep. The man did not use any energy arts nor lay any domain, yet his underlings were being sent to the ground before they could use theirs. He's amazing, right? The voice echoed from the side, and he couldn't help but nod. Only 3 seconds later did he turn to the side, finding the panther sitting on the ground on its butt, watching the fight along with him. "It's you! You bastard!" Duran roared out, immediately brandishing his eagle like claws toward Void, who puffed off. The guard boss reflexively swung his hand behind him, but it met with nothing. Horror painted his face when he looked down, watching those humongous fangs widen over his butt. "You don't dare! Clench! H!" A terrifying scream of pain instantly sent the entire room into a pause. Ryuk's palm hung in front of a guard's face, while a spear hovered by the side of his neck from another guard who had frozen at the chilling scream. They all immediately turned toward the scene and were left speechless. A figure was being flung around in the air, hands flailing wildly, but what was comical was where he was held. Monstrous dark fangs had clenched around his butt, flinging him here and there as he screamed in pain before he was roughly thrown upward. Duran slammed into the ceiling, his eyes rolling back as he fell with a helpless thump. The void blocker slipped from his hands, and Void picked it up and stored it away. While they were all dumbstruck, Ryuk immediately ran toward the door. Void did the same, and they both pushed through, disappearing down the alley. After them, the boss shouted, leaping to his butt to roar an order, only to collapse onto his back from the pain and slip into unconsciousness once more. Quickly, the guards stormed out the door in chase of the man and cat. But, ha ha ha, idiots, the words, filled with mockery, echoed from a rooftop where Void and Ryuk stood. Both of them looked down to see dozens of guards sprinting through an alleyway before disappearing into the distance. Ryuk exhaled unconsciously. Finally, they were out. In the next instant, he turned his cursory gaze to Void. "See, Ryuk, the good thing is we're out. Let's not focus on the bad." Void said it with a coquettish, pleading smile, prompting Ryuk to huff in annoyance before ignoring him. He then turned his gaze, taking in their surroundings. It was a place completely different from the Stellus clan, for instead of star castles, there were temples. Dark-colored temples rose among hundreds of statues, each depicting a winged entity. Scattered among them were more temples and several buildings shaped like dojos. "This is the Wingo Realm, home to all winged creatures," Void said. "This is the northern side of the Wingo Realm, filled with crazy monks and smelly birds," Void claimed, wrinkling his nose. "But on that far side is the south," he said, pointing his claws into the far distance behind them. "There, on the south side of the Wingo Realm, lies the celestial Wingo Realm, home to the purest and most celestial of winged beings. That's the place I sensed Isha from last time, but there are a lot of powerful and incredibly dangerous entities in the celestial Wingo Realm," Void said, and Ryuk hummed quietly. "Let's move then," he said, jumping off the roof to the next, and Void watched him quickly disappear in that direction. Was he even listening? Void mused beneath his breath, puffing once and instantly reappearing by Ryuk's side. "Hey, Ryuk!" Void shouted as Ryuk bounced off a rooftop, landing quietly on another and continuing. "What are you up to again?" he asked suspiciously, narrowing his eyes at the panther. "I just wanted to say your performance back there was excellent. You were usually the boom type of guy, one attack blowing them into the sky, but this time simply exceptional," he claimed, but Ryuk's suspicion didn't lessen an inch as he kept his gaze on him while jumping across rooftops. "Get to the point, Void. The point is, while the current you is really great, we'll need the boom, Ryuk, to get into the celestial Wingo Realm. So I was thinking you still have your boom, right?" Void asked, but almost coughed up blood from his answer. "No, I don't," Ryuk replied, leaving Void dumbstruck as he paused his run, allowing Ryuk to leave him behind. But quickly enough, he puffed once more, appearing by his side. "Wait, are you being serious?" he asked just to be sure. "What do I have to be worried about? After all, I've got the mighty Lord Void by my side," he said, looking at Void with a smug grin that made the Void Panther swallow, scratching its chest with its paw. "Honestly, I feel very humbled hearing that, but it unfortunately won't get us through that gate. There are some horrifying entities around that gate." "Trust me," Void said, and Ryuk shrugged, saying, Then pray we find Isha quickly enough. The Wingo realm was a powerful realm in the peak race conglomeration. One just above the stellar realm. It welcomed only the most powerful and purest of winged bloodlines, ranging from humanoids to beastly to undefinable. All races were winged, but distinguished by being the most powerful and purest of their kind. There were 4 areas in the Wingo realm. The northern area, known as the Dumb Wingo realm, a place not much worth speaking of, defined as the slum of the Wingo realm. And at the far extreme of the Wingo realm, its far south was the Celestial Wingo realm, a place home to the most powerful of the winged races. Ryuk and Void stepped out of the massive jungle dividing north and south, rising above the final stretch of colossal trees whose branches heaved them with every gust. Both remained silent, eyes wide with awe as they looked forward. It was a place quite unlike anything either had ever seen. There was a gate at the front. A gate so tall and mighty that its absolute tip pierced through the skies. Its surface was etched with runes with a complexity that stung the brain on mere attempts to decipher it. Various colors, golden, purple, blue, occasionally scorched through different areas of its glass-like frame. From its sides, endless walls rose, reaching about 200 meters high and stretching farther than the eye could see. But that wasn't all. On the walls, armored guards stood like statues, their eyes shining with arcane light as they looked down. Void sensed their presence and was momentarily speechless. Exignis stage. There were over a dozen guards on these walls, yet the lowest aura was that of the Exignis stage. But in Ryuk's world, things were much different. 24 Exignis stage experts and 5 Nihility stage experts. He mused quietly beneath his breath, though there was no ripple at all in his eyes. Still, even he was impressed. This amount of power used to protect the entrance gate to the realm was not something one sees every day. Actually, he had not even seen one before. "Okay, Void, we're here," Ryuk said, looking at Void, who shakily turned his neck to him, fur glistening from the sweat underneath. "What did you say again?" "Open a void portal. We're sneaking in," he said to Void, who pointed its fat claws into the distance. "You see that gate, Ryuk?" "Uh-huh. It blocks everything, Void. Space? Anything with the power to infiltrate something or nothing to pass through anything is absolutely repelled by those runes on the door. There's no way in hell even a god of Void will be getting through those gates," he said, but Ryuk's expression was as deadpan as ever. "Isha is beyond those gates, Void. Open a portal. There's no way I can open a portal to another side that I can't even sense. It's like trying to get through a blank void of nothing. There is nothing behind these gates to my void senses. But there is something behind that gate. Isn't there?" Ryuk asked, but Void shook his head. "You don't understand, Ryuk. I actually do." "Oh really? I'm the one with void energy within me, not your crippled ass. So rightfully only I understand," Void claimed, and Ryuk snorted, his face regaining focus as he began. "To teleport, a portal has to be opened, connected to the nodes of space. It's similar to creating a poke in the node that allows the cultivator to step into the node realm. And in the node realm, distance is very short. A cultivator only needs to take a poke at a node and go through it, appearing instantly on the other side, which makes teleportation look so instant. The massive gate doesn't get rid of the second node within it. It simply hides the nodes that lead back into it. So while you can open a vortex to get into the node realm, you won't find a node space that leads in behind these gates," he explained to Void, who had no way to refute. That was exactly what had happened. "If you know that, then you should know it's impossible," then Void said, but Ryuk shook his head. "But you know there is a node there, right? The key word is that it's hidden. But it's there. If only you can search, Void. If you can pull off that blindfold over your eyes that the gate's runic effect does, you will see a node, and you can poke out of it." He shot back as Void's brow furrowed. His words made some sense. "All you have to do, Void, is try and pull off the blindfold. How hard can that be for the mighty Lord Void?" he asked, and Void thought quietly for almost 5 minutes straight before he sighed. "Okay, quiet. Don't disturb me now," he said, and in the next moment Void closed its eyes. A few minutes later, the magic began. the magic of a beast with ever-growing potential. It was a dark realm, similar to the void, except instead of celestial bodies like stars or drifting cosmic particles, it was filled with pipes. Better yet, nodes, each interconnected chaotically, stretching farther into the void than he could see. This realm remained absolutely silent, devoid of both sound and motion, until a quiet flicker arose and a figure appeared within. It was a tiny black cat, its fur almost blending into the surrounding void. This was none other than Void, and for his smaller size, he had learned to ignore it, as it was nothing but the effect of being within this void realm. Void floated forward quietly, looking around him. He soon turned to his side and discovered a peculiar set of interconnected pipes. Here, the celestial Wingo realm should be situated around here, he mused, looking at the nodes, but then he was dumbfounded. If the gate ought to be hiding the nodes, then it's obvious there should be no nodes here at all, yet here they are. That could only mean one thing, Void mused, looking at the nodes. This is a trap, he muttered beneath his breath. Things like these were usually left within the void. Fake nodes. Stepping into them, one might expect to enter the correct node, but could suddenly find themselves hundreds of miles from where they intended. This must have been laid down by the experts at the gate. Any fool would have teleported straight in, only to probably land in some underground dungeon where all void nodes had been locked perfectly, imprisoning them without the guards even lifting a finger. But if the nodes are hidden, then where are they hidden? Where are the missing blanks? He asked none other than himself. Its limbs hovered around the space, driving it forward. It weaved in between these wrapped-up nodes, getting stuck in some that were too tightly knit together. But just like a cat, wherever his head could enter, his entire body could definitely go in, and Void was no exception. He exhaled loudly in relief as he tore himself out of an exceptionally tight hole, breathing out in exhaustion. He turned around to see the hole that had given him so much trouble, and his brows quivered. Is not even that small a hole? He mused, before turning to his stomach. Even with his small size, the flab of fat could still be seen jiggling around, and Void grabbed it, shaking it up and down for a while before he groaned tiredly. I really need to get back in shape after this, he muttered, before turning his attention forward. Now that he had been able to cross through the trap nodes, he had arrived in a different area. An area that held the place where the real void nodes to the celestial Wingo realm ought to be, but just as expected, there was nothing. Before him was an endless stretch of void with not even a single node in sight. Without nodes, there was no way he could open a vortex that led into a place that didn't exist. This was what he was trying to explain to Ryuk, but in that moment, the words echoed out in his head. But there is a place there, right? And if there's a place, then there is a node. It is just hidden. Now that I think of it, Void mused quietly, floating forward. This is a realm of nodes, so the word no nodes shouldn't exist, he muttered softly to himself. So if nodes don't exist, the high chances were that. He mused before he paused. It was being hidden. He narrowed his eyes suspiciously at the blank area around him. Slowly, the empty pieces began coming together, and the form of things began piecing itself together in his mind. Even though the area around him was nothing but a blank void, as he continued floating, it all began appearing in his head. Ethereal images of nodes all around him in the empty space. Void was never one to give such in-depth thought to something quickly, and soon his head began ringing with headaches. Still, he continued wallowing around for about 10 circles. By the 11th circle, he had been able to completely piece everything together. To hide a node, one must take advantage of the rune node. As he imagined the arrangement of the nodes, he slowly drifted to where the rune node ought to be, and quickly appeared before it. Without his eyes opening, his hands morphed into claws that instantly dipped into the void. As expected, the claw didn't fit like expected. It fit wrongly, and so he tried more forms of dipping before he found the one where all his claws entered, and in the next moment it dipped, finding the right nodes before he forcefully twisted. Clink! The clear sounds of a lock being unlocked immediately rang out, and Void snapped his eyes open in the next moment. His fur stood on end, feeling a sudden swell of energy, and immediately it raced away from the void. Boom! A powerful collision of energy sent Void flying out of the blank space. It quieted down a moment later, and Void dragged himself out of the trapped node he was hiding in. When he looked forward, his jaw dropped. Right before him, the blank spaces were no more. Instead, there was an endless array of various nodes. Nodes that should lead directly into the celestial Wingo realm. I did it! I finally did it! Void screamed in glee, preparing to quickly open a vortex in one of the nodes, but then he paused. A sudden roll of purple energy appeared, repelling the node he had been trying to open. What the? He muttered. He tried to open another one only to fail. It was like the nodes had been locked down, but that didn't make sense. It was impossible to lock down the nodes. The void can be locked down from the outside world but never within. Before Void could give his third try, sudden words echoed, freezing him completely and sending all his fur standing on end. And who might you be? Mamma mia! Void exclaimed, turning behind him with fur standing on end. Right there, standing in the Void node realm, was a lady whose features remained hidden by the golden light that gushed from her radiant figure. Even then, the 4 large wings stretched wide behind her were clearly discernible, and the sight alone made Void immediately understand. This had to be one of those terrifying experts of the celestial Wingo realm. Without wasting another word, Void instantly flashed towards the nearest node to escape. But even though his 4 tiny limbs dangled and flailed with incredible speed, he did not move forward an inch. What the? Only a moment later did he recognize the golden aura that had encapsulated him, preventing him from moving forward. I never mentioned that you could leave, did I? Quietly, Void slowly turned around. The fearful, twisted expression on his face immediately changed into a flattering smile. My lady, forgive my lowly self for such disrespect. I assure you, it was only born out of caution before your unrivaled might. He flattered, but none of his words came out like that in his mind. They were structured and respectful, an instinctive switch born purely for survival. An intelligent Void Panther, I see, the lady said. Void's brow twitched, but he replied without hesitation. You seem curious about me, my lady. Ask any questions freely, and I shall answer to the best of my ability. For a panther only at the mid-apocrypha stage, even if you were able to recognize the trap, you should not have been able to break the invisibility lock. Clearly, that realization must have come from someone more intelligent than you, she said. I am curious as to how many of you are involved in this crime. What are your aims for barging into the celestial Wingo realm? She said. Damn, she's smart. Still, his smile never wavered as he prepared to reply, only to be halted. If you lie to me, I will end you. His fur stood on end, and the excuses forming in his mind instantly vanished. I dare not lie to you, my lady. The truth is, I have no team at all, only a single partner. And we did not come to cause chaos or trouble in the celestial Wingo realm. I'm afraid we are too weak for that. We're only here to give greetings to one of our own within. So that makes a team of 3 then? She asked. Void almost choked on his breath. I dare not refute your wisdom, my lady, he said. A clear snort rang out through the void. You really are a scummy smartass. I humbly accept the praise, my lady. If there is nothing more you wish to ask, then I must return at once to my partner, lest he becomes worried. Oh, didn't you come here intending to illegally sneak in through the gate? She asked. Void could have sworn he saw an amused grin curve her lips, even trough the radiant light. Now that the brilliant godly light of your exalted self has shone upon me, my previously nefarious thoughts have been washed away, he said smoothly. I assure you, my lady, we shall turn back at once. And the one you came to see, won't it hurt to turn back now when you are so close? She asked. Void laughed. Do not worry, my lady. She has a big heart. Besides, the days are endless. There will surely be another day when we meet. She raised her hand. Phew. Void unconsciously exhaled as the golden light around him receded. Glad that worked out well, he thought. But in the next moment, his face stiffened. Noticing the receding golden radiance flared violently around him once more. He tried to run, but not a single limb moved. Runes formed in an instant, transforming into chains of golden light that tightly wrapped around his body, halting all movement as they constricted his tiny figure. In the next moment, he was dragged helplessly forward toward her outstretched hand. "I wonder what it is you still want from me," my lady, Void said in a sweet but also confused tone. A Void Panther is a rare beast even within the peak conglomeration, and one without a soul bond like yours is a treasure. "I have decided to make you one of my favorite students' soul beasts," she declared. Void's eyes widened in disbelief. "But what of my partner still waiting at the gate?" he asked urgently as he was dragged closer. "I will send someone to arrest him and imprison him in the dungeon. That is the rightful punishment for anyone who unlawfully attempts to breach the gate," she said coldly. "But my lady, our intentions are pure. We only came to see one of our own." "Then why didn't you enter properly?" she asked in return. "Why was your first thought to sneak in unlawfully instead of approaching the guards and requesting entry?" Void was left dumbfounded. "I feel you are too rare and with too much potential to rot in a dungeon is why I bring you with me," she continued. "Your normal punishment would have been the dungeon, the same fate as your friend. And unless someone comes to vouch for you in the future, both of you will rot there until death. Now be quiet and stop struggling." She opened a vortex to depart, turning to drag Void in, but she froze. The Void Panther was nowhere to be found. Her neck snapped to the side just in time to see the back of a white-haired figure holding the Void Panther in his arms. "Open it, now," Ryuk spoke calmly. The chains around Void's claws snapped instantly. Freedom surged through his limbs as he thrust his claws forward, piercing a node. "None shall leave unless I allow it." Her voice thundered through the void, golden energy surging toward them, but it never reached. Void carved a vortex, and in an instant, he and Ryuk were swallowed whole, leaving only drifting golden particles behind. A chilling silence was all that was left after they left before. "Unworthy of my mercy," she whispered. "Very well. You shall know my anger. Seems like that sweet tongue of yours failed you this time." "Huh?" The voice, laced with cold mockery, calmly echoed atop a bridge made of white crystalline gems. Along it walked many races, all united by one fact. In one way or another, they possessed wings with very few exceptions. And speaking of exceptions, it came from the one who had voiced the mockery, along with a panther that sat on the bridge railing, licking the golden dust from its fur. "You were the one who pushed me into it in the first place." Void blamed, annoyed, as Ryuk grinned in mockery. "Would have been interesting finding you fused with someone who would only see you as a fancy Void Panther. Wonder what race they could be off. Maybe a flying monkey," Ryuk said. "Ah, a flying monkey. That's ridiculous," Void said, but then froze in the next moment as a voice blasted into his ears. "Excuse me?" Void's tongue halted on his lips as he looked forward, finding a figure staring hatefully at him. It was a lady with lanky limbs and dirty brown hair, the kind that could only be found on a monkey, hovering in the air with two wings that rapidly flapped. "Oops, bad timing," he said, scratching the back of his head with an awkward gaze. The monkey lady humphed in annoyance before flying off, but not without delivering a solid tail slash that slammed into Void's nose, leaving him hugging his nose with both paws. "Ouch, that must have hurt," Ryuk said from the side, looking at him with a knowing smile of mockery. "I'll be the death of you one day. You'll see," Void said with a huff, jumping off the railing and walking along the bridge with the others. Ryuk followed behind, his eyes quietly taking in the surroundings. They had finally passed through the gates and entered the celestial Wingo realm. And truly, he had to admit, it was a truly celestial space. It was the only place Ryuk had ever seen where the world floated in the air instead of resting on land. There was zero earth in sight. The majority of the buildings were on clouds, hovering up and down rhythmically. Even the floors beneath which the various races walked had no earth between them. A world where the winged races lived amongst the skies. It was nothing short of amazing, But seeing the place filled to the brim with various experts and races, he knew his aim here might be slightly difficult, as he was trying to find one person out of the possible hundreds of millions of races here. If there's one place Isha can be, it'll most likely be a place that snows. Or a dungeon, Void added, watching in satisfaction as Ryuk's expression plummeted. Where does it snow around here? He asked, as Void looked at him with a raised eyebrow. You really think I'm the best person to answer that? I literally just came in less than an hour ago. You blonkhead, Void cursed. I wasn't asking you, you lecherous bastard. Ryuk cursed in return as they both walked off the bridge. They landed on an expandable ground on the lower levels where various stalls lay, and it didn't take long for Ryuk to find what he needed. A map store. The one behind it was a truly peculiar figure. The first thing that came to Ryuk's head was a lizard. He was scaly green, with a reptilian head half hidden by the round hat he wore, his fingers tapping around a cup with green juice. Hello? He greeted as the head shifted slightly in reply. I wanted to ask if you can direct me to a place where it snows around here. He asked the man who finally shifted his hat up. So it really is directions you want, he asked. Now his face could be seen, and it did look like a lizard's, though it retained humanoid traits. I have something special for you then, the map seller said, rising to pilfer through the shelves on the walls behind him before he brought out a wrapped scroll. On it were the words, Snow Wingo. It doesn't just hold the locations where it snows around here, but the clearest path to each of them from here onwards, he said, placing the scroll halfway down the table. Oh, thank you very much for your generosity, Ryuk said, his hands reaching for the map, only to be tapped away. Nothing comes for free in this world, Pacho. 2,000 Wingos for the map, he called out. Ryuk had no idea exactly how much a Wingo cost, or whether 2,000 was a rip-off, but he reached forward a moment later, bringing out a crystal. One, flaming red, with green flames flickering within its depths. I found this stone in the farthest middle of a special world, split apart by a powerful battle, he said, as the expert's eyes flickered. His hands reached out in a flash, grabbing at the crystals, studying them carefully, before his eyes widened in shock. But that almost seemed like an illusion as he immediately returned to his normal mysterious aura. This gem will sell for 1,000 Wingos. Bring one more and I'll give you the map, he said. In the next moment, a second green gem appeared in Ryuk's hands. The map seller immediately snatched it once more, keeping it close to his pouch before grabbing the map and passing it to Ryuk, saying, You're a nice man, Pacho. TSK. I'm sure in your little mind, you think being called nice is a compliment. But I can tell your blonkhead was obviously ripped off. Void's voice, dripping with mockery, echoed from the side, where Ryuk held up the map with a furrowed brow. I have like 700,000 of that same gem, so it's fine, he said, and the cat's jaw fell. He had no idea what that gem was, but studying from that map seller's expression, it seemed valuable. But Ryuk was never the one to gather treasures. How'd you even come by that? Void asked. I said it, a fight that split a world apart. Something told me the green gems were special, so I mined them all, Ryuk mused. He had indeed found these gems in the world of Jion, where he had faced the second calamity, the Demon of Dreams. After the battle, Jion had been split in two, and his eyes had caught those green gems. He had, of course, thought them nothing but stones, but the system had told him to keep them, and that was how he had gotten them. If there's a place Isha ought to be, then for sure it has to be here, Ryuk said, pointing to a place on the map. Where? Frost Scalio. The howling sound of whooshing frost echoed through the world as two figures walked through a land of drifting white. Why am I even here at all? The voice, full of bitter complaint, came from a fat panther plowing through the thick snow, his pitch-black fur half turned white from the downpour. Beside him was another figure, a man dressed in white made even whiter by the endless rush of snow. Both of their movements had been reduced to tiny steps, taking one at a time with great difficulty as they resisted the biting cold and the powerful breeze that tried to force them off their feet. Still, each persisted, albeit with great difficulty. Truly an intense amount of snowfall. Ryuk mused beneath his breath. He had never seen snow this powerful before, and to think they had been in a place bathed in golden rays of sunlight just a couple of hours ago. According to the map, this was the shortest route to Snowfallio, the only place in the celestial Wingo realm filled with such a great amount of snow. They needed to reach the city, and this was their shortest route. Though those words were now doubtful, as they've probably been walking for more than 70 hours. "Hey, Ryuk," Void called from the side as he turned to the Void Panther. "Open up that garden rift of yours. I need a break." He said this as a hailstorm of snow almost dragged his paws off the ground as he bitterly resisted. "I lost it," Ryuk replied, planting a step and continuing forward. "Lost it? What does that even mean? I thought that was a soul-bonded artifact," Void said in disbelief, puffing into a cloud of smoke to appear by his side. "Yes, it is. But my soul got stripped of every bond, so I lost it," Ryuk replied calmly, but then a strong gust sent him flying backward, and he landed on his belly, hands gripping the snow tightly. He crawled forward, his hands gripping something solid under the snow, and he hauled himself back to his feet. Looking ahead, surprise filled his eyes. It was as though they had scaled a towering mountain, and now at its summit with a city lying just below. A city that sprawled across the snow-covered land, surrounded by a barrier that reduced the amount of snow falling, allowing only tiny flakes to drift gently into it. You blockhead," Void cursed from below as he fell flat on his stomach. Ryuk rolled his eyes and grabbed the panther's pointed ears. "You?" Void lashed out with a paw, but halted as it noticed the light. It looked downward, its breath catching in its throat. Just beneath them was the city. A city glowing with clear light, signaling only one thing: warmth. In an instant, Void puffed out from Ryuk's side, and when he reappeared, he was already above the city skies, soaring down at high speed. "Hopefully you're somewhere around here, Isha," Ryuk mused before sliding down the mountain wall himself. The path was curved, so there was no need to walk. He simply slid down, and soon he stood before the snowy barrier, where a figure soon slid down as well, landing on his butt beside him. "Damn Void barrier," Void cursed beneath his breath. Though there was a barrier around the city, he had thought to teleport through it, only to be repelled by a void block and slammed headfirst into the barrier. It was far heavier than it looked, causing him to slide off its surface. Rubbing his painfully red nose, he glanced to the side, only to find Ryuk standing there. Turning back, he saw the clear sliding marks Ryuk had left on the snow. "Cheater." Ryuk merely sneered at his pain, his hand reaching out to touch the barrier. It was glassy, yet it did not bulge at all, almost metallic. The gate to the Snow City was only a few meters away, and guards stood nearby. Ryuk waved at them, and 3 humanoid guards covered in scales walked forward toward him. "Hello," he greeted. "What do you want?" One of the guards snapped back. "We've come a really long way to visit an old friend who most likely resides here in Snowfallio," Ryuk replied. "Did your friend give you a snow pass? It's the only way the barrier will open for you," another guard said as they watched Ryuk's brows furrow, thinking, there was always a need for passes around here. It was the kind of place where, unless you were invited, you were not allowed in. "Unfortunately, we do not have one." "Yeah, that's obvious, or you wouldn't be stuck outside," the earlier guard said. "Now shoo off. I do have something you may be interested in, though," Ryuk said. They watched as he dipped his hand into his pocket, as though trying to dig something out. The trio paused, observing him and wondering what it was, and in the next moment, he pulled it out. It was a box seemingly made from a crystalline white gem, gleaming with constantly changing blue runes across its surface. Suddenly, 2 of the guards felt a surge through their bodies, their blood seemingly quivering in the presence of that scale, and their eyes lit up. What is that?" one of them asked, and Ryuk's expression turned solemn. "Inside this box is a scale," he said. "A scale?" "Yes. A scale from one of the most powerful dragons in the universe. A jade dragon." He spoke grandly. "And how did you obtain such a treasure?" "The jade dragons have been extinct for centuries now," a guard asked skeptically. This was a treasure I was blessed with as an inheritance. A gift of birth, you could say, Ryuk replied. And you're willing to give that away for a pass into the city? I'm not, Ryuk said calmly. I see two of you, he continued, pointing to two of the guards. You both have been stuck at the peak of the Apocrypha stage for quite a while now, haven't you? How did you? Your blood has draconic essence within it. Unless you manage to trigger that essence, you will never achieve true existence. What you need is a trigger, one from powerful draconic material, and what could be better in this world than a true scale from a jade dragon? He asked, letting the words sink in before continuing. If any of you hold this in your palms while cultivating, you should be able to trigger your essence and break through to the Exignis stage. But this is an inheritance. I'm not handing it over forever, just willing to lend this to you for a week, which is as much as I wish to spend in this city. After a week, you return it and I will leave the city. What do you say? He asked. He watched the two guards glance at each other, a quiet flicker of understanding in their eyes. You're only allowed in with the pa. The third guard tried to speak, but his shoulder was grabbed by both of them, silencing him. He turned to them, and they tapped his shoulder twice, nodding to him. In the end, he backed off, and one of the guards brought out a card, which he slid over the glass, allowing the barrier to open up just enough for both Ryuk and Void to enter. Fine, the guard said, reaching out toward the box, only for Ryuk to shift it back slightly. I'm borrowing this from you for 1 week, after which I'll get it back. And you cannot open it. I hope you understand the terms, he said, and the guard nodded. Then, I'll place trust in your words, he said, passing them the box. They gave him a pass card as both he and Void walked through the gates. After they left, the third guard immediately protested. No one is allowed in without a pass, and you both let him in? Don't be foolish, Yamal, the guard holding the box said. With this, Raymond and I will finally be able to reach the Exignis stage, becoming qualified for a promotion. And not only that, after we break through to the Exignis stage, we can sell this off. A scale of an already extinct king-level beast, such as a primordial jade dragon. Do you know how much this will go for? This is something 100 times more valuable than an ordinary pass. Not like a fool like him can cause any chaos in the city anyway. We'd be foolish not to take such an offer, the second guard said, and the third furrowed his eyebrows before muttering. So you both don't plan to give it back after a week, do you? Hey, you want a share of the profit or no?
I guess you do.
Ha ha ha. You blonkhead. You got fooled once more. Void roared, slapping Ryuk on his butt. Hey, he shouted as Void clapped his head. You really just gave them a jade dragon scale. Wait, aren't you a dragon or something? You're a jade dragon? Void asked in disbelief as Ryuk rolled his eyes. You blonkhead, you gave them a piece of your scale. Don't tell me it's because you've got 700,000 more? Now that's just being wasteful. And for sure those damn crooks aren't returning shit. You probably won't even see them again. You blonkhead, Void cursed, slapping toward Ryuk's but once more. But he jumped, the paw waving past beneath his legs. Void, you dumb lecherous thing. You really think I'm going to give a part of myself so freely? Ryuk asked, and Void paused. What's really in the box? An ordinary glass shard, along with a little bit of my Aetherus energy. He answered, as Void paused in dumb shock. There's no scale in the box, just a glass shard. Those idiots believed it because of my jade dragon Aetherus essence. It must have made their blood quiver in their veins. But that's just some energy. Once they open the box, guess what happens? The essence fades away into the air. Void mused dumbly. Yep, and all they'll see at the end is a glass shard reflecting their dumb faces at them. Ryuk couldn't help but cackle evilly for a moment, and the disgust in Void's eyes quickly shifted to reverence. You evil thing. You have my respect. Void shouted out loud as Ryuk grinned in evil pride. Now, we need to find Isha. I want to be out of here in a week, he said as they both looked around the place. The homes weren't gargantuan castle walls or temples. They were actually simple buildings in the shape of huts, with bright, warm light gushing forth from the windows. The races within this place were mostly humanoid, all possessing scales, making Ryuk fit in more compared to back in Celestial Wingo. And when he thought about where Isha could be, he at least knew no one in their right mind would allow an ice dragon to live amongst ordinary races like this. That led him to look deeper into the distance, where grand, castle-like structures rose. Here, it felt like a village, but beyond lay a city, with pointed castle peaks piercing the heavens far beyond the barrier. Snow fell more heavily there compared to the gentle drifting here. Now, that's a good place to start, Ryuk mused to himself, and in the next moment, he signaled to Void, who helped open a vortex, and both of them disappeared into it, quickly heading toward the city. As they reached the city, they encountered the guards once more, but this time Ryuk was prepared. Bringing out the cards the guards had given him, he passed them silently, and the gates opened. Without any further word, both human and cat stepped in with no problem, disappearing further down the frosty bridge. Kakik. For a second there, I felt so important, Void said. Being allowed in just by showing a card, without needing to break in or sneak around, felt surprisingly exhilarating. Unfortunately, good things don't last for the evil. Get out of the way, you worthless peasants. The heavy roar echoed out loud, followed by the rapid sound of claws scraping against the ground. Immediately, Void and Ryuk jumped to the side at the same time, just as a large carriage dragged forward by two frost wyverns hurriedly weaved past them. You hell-forsaken moron. I wish you crash and return to the hell you came from. Bastard. Void cursed out loud, but all he was met with was the rapid clashing as the carriage was quickly pulled away. That bastard. Void murmured in anger, but turned to the side to find Ryuk's brow furrowed. Hey, the moron is annoying. Isn't he? He asked Ryuk, who hummed. He really is, but what? The cold coming from the frost runes on that carriage resembles that of an ice dragon's. Huh? Void turned to look at the carriage that had hurriedly disappeared onward. You think that has anything to do with Isha? It asked, to which Ryuk's brows remained knitted. He knew Isha very well but even though that level of coldness he felt was similar to that of an ice dragon like Isha, the aura wasn't Isha's. If it were, he would have noticed it from miles away. Could another ice dragon be hanging around here? I'm not sure, but why don't we begin our search from there? Fine by me, Void said immediately, stretching its paw out to carve open a vortex. Hopefully I get my paws on that bastard driving the carriage. We'll teach him a few lessons. He spat, stepping into the portal, quickly followed by Ryuk. Quietly, they trailed after the carriage, going deeper into the city. The deeper they headed, the colder the cold grew, the higher the castles, and the more powerful the auras of those walking on the streets. It reached a point when only Exignis stage experts remained around, and that was when the carriage paused before an extra-large castle. The carriage driver got down, walked to the carriage door, and pulled it open. He remained by the side with his head bowed. In the next moment, frost crystals poured out through the door, and following after were snow-white legs, exposed only for a millisecond before being covered by a snow-white gown. Quietly, two figures stepped out, in full frosty white gowns, with equally long snowy white hair that trailed down to their feet. Their faces were covered, and they stepped up the stairs covered in a snow-white carpet, disappearing through the castle's gate. Only after they disappeared into the door did the carriage driver rise upright, stepping into the carriage before quickly driving off. Weird. No guards at all. Void murmured beneath his breath. Beside him stood Ryuk, and they both stood in an alleyway between two buildings. Not that weird. The majority of the castles around also don't have guards. Ryuk mused. And that's not weird? Void asked with a raised eyebrow. Yeah, it's weird. Many of the random castles they encountered had teams of guards patrolling the entrance and gates. But coming into these larger castles, there were no guards at all, and things were mostly silent. Perhaps they felt like they didn't need them. He mused to himself, but in the next moment he quietly rose upright. He had been standing upright previously, yet when Void looked at him now he felt a weird change. As if he were only just standing now. Follow me, Void, he said, and Void uttered no word in defiance, as they walked the stairs before the castle's gate. Don't touch. There's a barrier that will blow you off. Void said quickly, noticing the runic barrier on the door. In response, Ryuk's hand quietly reached out. As his hands quietly pierced through the air, his eyes slowly changed to a serpentine blue. The back of his hand was quickly covered in crystal blue scales, and then his hand landed on the door. The runic barrier on the door had cracks quietly running through its entire length from his slightest touch, and when he pushed further, shatter! It shattered like brick glass, and Ryuk's hand reached for the door, knocking once before quietly pushing it open. A tempest of frost was all that could be seen surging outward, but he stepped in and disappeared into the tempest, quickly followed by Void. Bang! The door shut with a heavy bang as they both stepped into it. When they stepped in, it was like stepping into a completely different realm. A large, unending hall of white, with stairs like pillars trailing into the ceilings. Additionally, there stood these beings on each stair pillar. White-haired, white-skinned, white-garmented. Men, women, they spread as far as his eyes could see, and the second Ryuk stepped in, all of their eyes instantly locked onto him. More than 100 eyes were looking down at him, the weakest being at the Exygnus stage. Void felt his spine chill as every muscle within him froze in fear. Damn! We walked right into a trap. I've seen frost wyverns back in the Wyvernoid Kingdom. Ryuk's voice pierced through the silence, ringing clearly even to the farthest space of the hall. I did not expect to see more in a place that belongs to the slaves of those who had hurt their most powerful queen. He said, a firm tone in his voice. You're not allowed here. A feminine voice cut sharply, followed by the sound of ringing footsteps. Quietly, from a distance, two people walked toward them. They were the same women who had descended from the carriage, but now they no longer covered their faces, revealing crystal-clear, beautiful features that seemed to be beyond this world. But none of their heaven-shaking beauty sent even a ripple through Ryuk's heart. An ice dragon, Ryuk said, as the footsteps of one of the ladies instantly paused, with the other pausing a moment later. How greatly unexpected. And here I thought only one ice dragon existed in this world. Ryuk called out in amusement. What are you? One of the ladies asked. It's not as important as where she is.